We used to always be told that once something is on the internet, it stays there forever. But now we've come to learn that simply isn't always the case. There's the Mario 64 screamer that still hasn't been found, Flash games that presumably weren't saved in time, the original Jeff the Killer photo, you get the point. The internet has become so colossal in size that we can find more lost media than any other time in history, while simultaneously, there's just too much content to preserve all of it. Today we're going to be diving into a lost creepypasta about the Soviet Red Army killing God. Search efforts have been popping up sporadically for almost a decade now, but no one has been able to find this lost piece of creepypasta history. Is it out there? Does it even exist? Let's just get right into it. In August of 2022, someone made a post to r/tipofmytongue with the title, "A short story about God being killed in Siberia in the 70s. The contents of the post are as follows. It may have been a no-sleep story or something similar, but I very strongly recall this as someone who was deep into the creepy short story rabbit hole as a child. I think I found it on the front page of a creepypasta forum around 5 years ago. From what I can recall, it's a short story about the Soviet Union finding God, yes, capital G, in the wilderness of Siberia in the 1970s. They then kill him and run tests/use pieces of his corpse to develop their technology. This may be unrelated, but I believe there was an accompanying picture of 4 armed men in the snow surrounded by twigs or shrubs. The main 2 are smiling and holding a large piece of skin or hide up with sticks, while the other 2 looked intensely at. Gives me the chills whenever I think about it, but the concept has always been so fascinating to me, so it stuck with me when I read it. If anyone has any idea, please help me solve this. Been thinking about it for some time now. Edit. Here is a Photoshop job I just did of what I recall the image to look like. I remember a big emphasis on the lens flare in the original image, if that helps anybody." Considering you're currently watching internet mystery/lost media content, I'm willing to bet you probably read at least a few creepypastas back in the day. The first I ever read was The Ringing when I was maybe 8 or 9, and I was a little kid, so at the time I didn't know they were completely fictional. I was never really that big into reading the creepypastas themselves, besides a few, but I absolutely loved content that would cover them, like scare theater for example. So this lost media case immediately piqued my interest. It was actually sent to me by a viewer, so thank you for bringing this to my attention, and I want to get this mystery solved. User DoomGamer3K commented, "Apparently this has been a hard to find story. This other post might help if we can find the right pieces," and linked this tip of my tongue post from 2014 of a user trying to find what appeared to be the exact same thing OP was searching for. OP replied, "Holy shit. I cannot believe this goes so far back and is so well documented. Thank you so much. I really did not know how many people shared this memory with me. If I didn't read it, then there's a chance I got the idea from somehow seeing that post, but I can't imagine considering it's 8 years old and pretty obscure. I don't know about the image though, maybe something I cooked up to try to put a face to the name." So there's at least one other post, which leads me towards solidifying this as not a saki sanobashi attempt. I know there's bandwagoners and all, but there's a lot more to go over the deeper that we dive into this. User the Merminator did a lot of detective work for us and reported back with, "I have been scouring the internet for hours since coming across your posts with not much to show for it. I've got the story traced back to about 2008 or 2009. A site said it was floating around the X community on 4chan around then. It's mentioned anecdotally in many places and apparently inspired an entire online community. See Global Occult Coalition website. I see it referenced on a few sites as being a lost creepypasta. Gotta hand it to you, OP. This tip of my tongue got me into some deep rabbit holes." They also found a Tumblr post from 2017 referencing the story as lost, and a Genius article about the history of the SCP Foundation. This excerpt reads, "GOC was inspired by a pasta that was roaming TG or X at the time about how Nietzsche was wrong, God wasn't dead. At least, not when he wrote that. The entity that called itself Yahweh didn't die until the late 50s, destroyed by the Russian army. We'll get into the Global Occult Coalition momentarily. And I found this 4chan post from 2020 that refers to the creepypasta as lost as well. This is the tip of my tongue sub, so users did have suggestions on other possibilities, but none were what OP was looking for. The most recent comment is actually by the viewer that suggested this topic to me. They had found an image that I think is safe to say the image that OP had seen attached to the creepypasta. It looks spot on to OP's recreation. It is a photograph of Finnish soldiers displaying the skin of a Soviet soldier in 1942. I don't know if I can show it on YouTube. It's not in color and looks pretty vague. I would not consider it visually gory, but the story behind it is obviously very dark. I'll just show a blurred version of the image. Our findings from this post are that people have been searching for it since at least 2014. The story can be traced back to 2008 or 9. It inspired the Global Occult Coalition SCP, and we have the image that was attached to the creepypasta. Let's go back in time to when people were initially trying to find the lost story. The first Reddit appearance of this I could find dates back to February 15th, 2014, posted by user Soviet Troll Guy to r/tip of my tongue with the title, "A Creepypasta Where the Soviet Red Army Kills God." And yeah, when I saw Soviet Troll Guy, I was like, huh, damn, they weren't even trying to hide the hoaxes back then. But they made their Reddit account years before this post and are still active, so I'm assuming the creepypasta was interesting to them because of their Soviet interest. It's worth noting that this OP hadn't read the story themselves. They had only heard of it and was hoping Tip of My Tongue would know the name. This was, without saying, another unsuccessful attempt. This user did, however, link to an SCP wiki page about the aforementioned Global Occult Coalition, where we can see under the About section it states, "The Global Occult Coalition was a group of interest created by Kane Pathos Crow in the early days of the SCP Foundation wiki, inspired by a creepypasta about how the Soviet Red Army killed God in the 1950s. It postulated the existence of a separate but equally powerful force in the paranormal world." Now, I'm gonna be completely honest, I never got into SCPs. I didn't know any lore or anything prior to making this video, but based on my recent findings, Kane Pathos Crow is a character within the SCP Foundation, but behind the character is an author who has written a lot for the SCP Foundation, one being the Global Occult Coalition. Here is a quote from an interview in response to a question asking where he had got his inspiration from. "I had read a creepypasta at the time that stated, 'God was dead and we had killed him.' Not Nietzsche, but in 1948 with the combined efforts of the Western Allies and the Soviet Army. This thought just tickled my fancy. It was helped by the fact that there was very little information regarding how the Foundation interacted with any sort of governmental oversight. But he never gave a specific name, so this doesn't really lead us anywhere, unless I get a response from the SCP Foundation, because I did construct an email inquiring about it. I'll keep y'all updated on that one." 7 months later, in September of 2014, another Tip of My Tongue post emerges. User Zobi commented, "Sounds almost like the Salvation War," and linked to a TV Tropes article about the trilogy. While not technically a creepypasta, it was an online story that premiered in 2008. Its premise is that the governments of the world declare war on heaven and hell after God lets everyone know that Satan is coming to take everyone's bodies and souls. So similar-ish themes, but it wasn't the answer to this mystery. Mongoose said, "I don't know where to find it, but I'm pretty sure I read it in case you were wondering if you were going mad." A few users suggested the Russian sleep experiment, but as far as my memory goes, that never had anything to do with a Soviet army killing God. Then user More Oblivion commented this, "Found this thread. Seems that the story is real." But this was still just someone whose friend had read it. If you think this is starting to look like some saki sanobashi shit, you're not alone. In response to More Oblivion's comment, this user said, "Or the rumor started somewhere and the concept is vivid and familiar enough to creepypasta fans that if you think they might have read something similar and everyone else is interested enough to keep asking about it. Hope it is real though." Over the years, another post would surface of someone asking about this story. January 2017, the Peen Machine asks r/SCP, "Does anyone know the name of this creepypasta?" Referencing the About page of the GOC. Just did a bunch of searching. Lots of people asking for it, no one ever finds it. I decided to dig around a bit. Here's where it gets kind of interesting. It looks like it's lost. I found 2 different tip of my tongue threads and both said they can't find it. This was almost 3 years ago now. Beyond that, most searches led to vaguely similar but not quite right pastas. As much as I would like to see it as well, it looks like it will take a much deeper investigation if one hopes to find it. In 2018, someone turns to tip of my tongue once again, and once again with absolutely no luck. Jump a year later in 2019, 2 additional posts, neither with any success. This is just a repeated case of someone trying to find it. Is it the Russian sleep experiment? Gateway of the mind? No. Looks like it inspired the GOC, found reference of it on 4chan, then nobody can ever retrieve the actual creepypasta, and it has stayed lost for 9 years. But that brings us to the inevitable question, does this really exist? I'm sure you also love the idea of some unsettling lost creepypasta, with search efforts reappearing throughout time, and all the mystery surrounding it, the idea of solving it, but let's take a step back and look at the evidence. Cain Pathos Crow allegedly read this himself. If the creepypasta is non-existent, he's either misremembering something else he read that we haven't been able to find yet anyway, or he's lying, which would be really weird, especially considering that he seems to be a significant figure within the SCP community, and I just don't see that being the case. The other instances of people remembering it firsthand, instead of merely hearing about it, is OP of this tip of my tongue post, this commenter on a post from 2014, and a few different commenters on a post regarding the creepypasta on r/lost media. User illegalchoco21 said they remembered reading it, and PM Your Ears replied with, I remember reading this too. I imagine I found it via the Tumblr user Sixpensy, or maybe this one. Does anyone know the exact name? Given several posts to tip of my tongue in various places, going back 7+ years. Can we class this as a lost media even without the name? But in terms of the name, I'm sure it was something like Drowned God, Dead God, something simple along those lines with God in it. While this user recalled the story, they did admit it was too fuzzy of a memory to be fully trusted. And Strike Eagle 784 remembered as well, but didn't think there were 2 Soviet soldiers to the left and right of the skin. However, we already have the original photo, so the only way there wasn't soldiers on each side of the skin is if the image was cropped in the version that they saw. Someone over there 42 had thought the story even predated the modern internet, saying there's 2 versions of the same story. The one you described, and one where the US nuclear testing in the Midwest allowed them to capture God. I remember reading these back in college in the 90s. They added it was a book on fringe and conspiracy theories, thinking they may have still had the book. The Working Lad replied, please keep us updated, but they didn't deliver. As far as the memories and recollections go, the only concrete proof, in my opinion, that at the very least something similar is out there is Cain Pathos Crow's interview. And with this, I had kind of hit a dead end. Searching myself got me nowhere, besides finding a few mentions of a lost creepypasta, never finding the creepypasta itself. But just a few months ago, we had what I had considered the biggest finding in this saga so far. Thanks to user Axamlo, I wanted to give them full credit for this lead. Here is a comment on a 4chan post from September 27th, 2008. The reason that monsters don't roam the world freely anymore is simple. Science has progressed to the point where they can be easily killed. Monsters depended upon humanity remaining technologically inept. This was the reason for the Christian Dark Age, supernatural entities desiring that humanity not be able to challenge them for rule of the planet. Both the Soviet Union and the USA throughout the Cold War made it their duty to put any high-level supernatural entities that they found to death. Publicly, this was acknowledged only as testing of nuclear weapons. Nietzsche was wrong when he claimed that God was dead. The Soviet Union didn't put Yahweh to death till October 30th, 1961, for crimes against humanity. The leadership of both governments today has fallen under the thrall again, and it is unclear who now will stand against them. Lesser supernatural entities are exceptionally vulnerable to heavy metals. Lead is quite effective, but depleted uranium is best. Single shots aren't deadly to them, but repeated hits can quickly drop them. Vulnerability to silver is disinformation, as it is far less effective than ordinary lead bullets. The advent of semi-automatic and fully automatic weapons brought the monster problem rapidly under control, and today people are so disconnected from the problems that they caused in the past that many people don't believe that they ever existed. This would make a killer story. I know the evil farming game was a Vinesauce stream.
Harvest Moon, but with like corpses.
I know how insanely weird and jumbled memories can become. I wouldn't be surprised if Kane read this and his creative brain turned it into more thorough inspiration than it legitimately was. It also mentions the nuclear weapon testing and Yahweh. It seems a little too dead on, but the skin picture that at least 2 people have remembered, and the fact others do recall it, albeit iffy recollections, does make me think someone read this 4chan post and might have turned this into a full story that is now lost to time. If only there was a way to confirm it. Oh yeah, I emailed them. Hi Kylie, we reached out to Kane Pay This Crow, and they informed us that they remember it being a creepypasta on X approximately 15 years ago. They confirmed that none of the ones mentioned in the Reddit post, as of the morning of April 9th, 2023, were the creepypasta in question. Unfortunately, they did not remember any further details about it. Our apologies. Sincerely, the SCP Wiki's Internet Outreach Team. 15 years ago, on X. I don't want to get my hopes up for verification, but well, it wouldn't hurt to send them the 4chan link. So I did, and then I waited, dwelling on if this was going to solve this near decade-long mystery, eagerly checking my email like every hour, just hoping I'd get a response. Even if they told me it unfortunately wasn't what Kane remembered, it'd be reassuring to know for certain. I waited 5 excruciatingly long days. Then on April 15th at 8:18 p.m., I received this. Hi Kylie, we just heard back from Kane. He has confirmed that the link was indeed the story he read that inspired the Global Occult Coalition. We hope this helps. This is the lost creepypasta, and it is now found. Funnily enough, it's been found for about 4 months at the time of making this video. Also, I realized the title wasn't going to be accurate at all, considering a Reddit user did find the alleged creepypasta, but I had already decided on the title before I found the lead, and I thought it had a ring to it, so my apologies for the deception. But I also wanted it to be a fun surprise. And again, thank you so much to user XMLO. They hands down are the one who unknowingly solved this case. I emailed the SCP Foundation, didn't do a whole lot, and was just lucky enough to get a response, and I truly appreciate them reaching out to Kane. This still begs the question of where this OP saw the skin image, but I have a theory on that. The user that messaged me about this case had commented, sharing a Tumblr post on a creepypasta page that featured that same image. It seems to be the historically accurate story, but you'll notice how it mentions the Red Army and killing. I wouldn't be surprised if OP saw this story somewhere, but also vaguely knew of the creepypasta that inspired the GOC, and with memory being as funky as it is, blended these two together into one thing that they believed they read. Now, whether or not that's what happened with OP, there very well may be a lost creepypasta inspired by the 4chan post that's out in the wilderness of the internet, sitting, waiting to be found. But we've got, at the very least, part of the mystery solved. After 9 years. I hope you enjoyed this video. I thought this lost media case deserved infinitely more attention, and I'm very glad we've been able to restore a fragment of internet history by putting a piece of it to rest. Thank you.